these people getting together, we've got lots of good things that we're trying to give to the children. And one of the things I say about the differences between violence and nonviolent people, and as I start to describe these differences, one of the things that you're going to notice, folks, as I describe these four things, is that these are the same differences. You could substitute all kinds of words here when I say major differences between hostile and well-adjusted individuals. You could substitute all kinds of words up there, like major differences between happy and miserable people. Because basically it's the same thing. You ever notice the most miserable human beings you know? They're quite hostile. Everywhere they go, they're attacking people, verbally, angrily. And you just listen to our language, folks. Think about our language and the terms that we use right now. Like many of you, I did not even grow up with the term road rage. You ever think about that? We didn't even have that term. We did not even have the term road rage. Now, we've got, because we had to create something to describe all the idiots out there on the road. We didn't have the term road rage, but now we've expanded that thing. If you read the papers, we take this term, we go, now we've got road rage, we've got shopping rage. I read an article about office cubicle rage. How do you even do that? I like you climbing over the top or something. We have email rage. People are, I could just see them hammering away. But we have all these assorted rages, and in so many ways it's indicative of what our culture's become. And many of you, even though you come from some distance away, you probably heard about what happened right in here in our neck of the woods not long ago, last year. They had it on the news. Whole bunch of kids running out of a building, scared to death, crying, and what were they afraid of? This particular building? All the kids running out of this building, was it a fire? Was it an earthquake? No. Inside this building were 20 parents beating each other's brains in over something really important, a hockey game for 10-year-olds. That was right here in our backyard, right up here at Clifton Park, right up here up north. 20 parents had to be hauled out of there by the police because they were beating each other's brains in over a hockey game for 10-year-olds. Now, if you start to wonder, how do kids become more violent today? It's a no-brainer. It's a no-brainer. And when I start to describe what the major differences are between violent and nonviolent people, it's the same thing between happy and miserable people, because you'll know the most miserable human beings you know, they just continually attack people, attack people, attack people. A number one, right there at the foundation, impulse control. And any teacher that's out there, any parent that's out there working in the trenches, working with tough kids, I talk to teachers all the time, and they'll say, you know, I don't care about character education, Project Save, or gun control or anything. You know what I really need? You know what I really, really need? I need kids to keep their hands to themselves for just one day while they're standing in line getting a drink of water. That's all I need. Just give me that. And when you talk to teachers out there working with kids, it's always about impulse control, impulse control, impulse control. Stop yourself from smacking this other kid. Stop yourself from doing this. Stop yourself. Put those brakes on to be able to do those things. And you know, it doesn't matter whether you're 4 years old or 84 years old. It doesn't matter. Same thing. Look at miserable adults. They can't stop themselves. They can't stop themselves. And one of the things that is convenient about being out here in New York is that my relatives are in other parts of the country, Colorado and California, and I can always use them as case studies in my psychopathology classes. And I always use my brother-in-law because we were out to dinner some time ago, go out to dinner, waiting for the meal. Young waitress is bringing us items. She brings us food, and she brings us the appetizer that we had ordered after all of the main meal had been delivered. Now, outside of maybe my house burning down, or losing my automobile for good, or losing a limb, I could think of nothing worse than having the appetizer arrive after the main meal. Now, like most of you, it's just not a big deal. It's really not a big deal. This poor girl, she's a trainee. She got a little trainee badge on. She's like 16 years old. She's bringing us the appetizer after the main meal. But it's not just a small thing for my brother-in-law. So he grabs this poor girl and he says, "Hey, you should know. The appetizer always comes before the main meal. I want to see the manager." So the rest of us are sitting at the table going, "Oh my God, here he goes again." So he grabs the manager. The manager comes over. He's chewing out the manager. Here's the lesson, folks, is that he can only teach people what he is. So he teaches this girl, the world is full of jerks. He teaches the manager of the restaurant the world is full of jerks. He teaches all these people, these tables around us, man, there you go, another guy there. The world is full of jerks. Just look at him right over there, going off his nut. And that's what he's teaching the world, and he's teaching us who are dining with him that, we're hiding behind our napkins and stuff, that your food doesn't digest well when you're dining with jerks. So we're all sitting there, and he finally, when he gets done, he says, he gets done, he turns around to the rest of us at the table, and he says, hey guys, I got that comped on our bill. See what you get when you stand up for your rights? And he was so proud. And I was just sitting there like, and I don't know about you, but when that kind of stuff occurs, I'm like the deer in the headlights. I don't even have a good thing to say. I'm just sitting there. But isn't that diagnostic? Think about that for a minute. See what you get when you stand up for your rights. Think about kids growing up today who believe they have the right to hostility. I have the right to mistreat this waitress. I have the right to mistreat this clerk at the counter because of the, No, you don't. You don't. That's a myth. You don't have the right to mistreat people as though you're going to be chewing out this poor girl who's minimum wage at Walmart about the long lines and that she's going to turn around and call Sam Walton himself. Yes, we're going to change the whole world just for you. But we think about some of the really stupid things that we do that set off our impulse control, and it's an indicator of where adults are going to. They believe they have the right to violence. Now, the reason why that stuck in my mind so well is that impulse control with adults. Is that the next day, I walked into a Barnes & Noble's. And you know what this is like, guys. Barnes & Noble's, you walk in there. It's like a library, and it's quiet, and you go in. It's like a really cool oasis to go and relax. And I go walking in there. I open the door, and I hear a piercing scream coming from the inside of the Barnes & Noble's like I've never heard in my life. I hear this scream that is so loud, and I walk in the door. I'm going, oh, my goodness, what's going on? And this scream's, ah! And it's all coming out of a little guy about this big. And he is just flipping out because he wants to buy this book. So he's screaming at his mom, Mom, please! And he wants this book. And when you're 2 or 3 years old, any of you that have kids, you know this. When you're 2 or 3 years old, you only have one goal. And that's to be king or queen of the universe. And quite often they are successful at doing that too. But this kid is just flipping out, and he's pitching a fit there. And now now what they do? They regress. So he's flopped himself on the floor, and mom's just she's dragging him up to the counter. Now as a parent that sometimes if you're in church or you're in a restaurant or you're in a quiet place, you got to drag him out. But there's other times you just got to get the job done. You went there to get groceries, or you went there to get that book. So here's mom. She's dragging the kid up to the counter. But here's the lesson. She's saying to the child, no, we're not getting the book. No, we're not getting the book. No, we're not getting the book. And the lesson is, you know what? She didn't have to beat him to teach him this doesn't work. She didn't have to scream at him to teach him that this does not work. I guarantee you, he cried himself to sleep in his car seat within the next half hour. We know that. Kids do that. But you know what he learned? He learned that it doesn't work. Because if it does work, it doesn't take B.F. Skinner to figure this one out. We know this from educational psychology. If it does work, he does it again. And he does it again. And again. And again. And again. And then he grows up to be my brother-in-law. It's these people out there that no one ever stops them. They just keep spouting off. They keep going crazy. And I always thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could just treat adults the same way we treat kids? So we say, no, you're not getting the book. Wouldn't it be wonderful if that little 16-year-old waitress would go, no, you're not getting the appetizer. No, you're not getting the appetizer. No. Let him cry himself to sleep in his car seat too. But that's a major thing that I think people that are working with kids, that they really focus on that impulse control. And I don't think you can ever start too soon. I think the youngest age possible, the better. Second thing is problem solving. Problem solving, what I mean by that, and what you'll notice, the differences between ineffective or effective problem solvers has to do with their locus of control. And some of this literature goes back, you talk about people that, many of the major theories, they talk about being environmentally supported to self-supported. And you think about being an internal locus of control versus an external locus of control. Look at miserable people in your life right now. Look at the most miserable human beings you know. And they come walking in, they go, you know what the problem with this place is? First of all, I couldn't find a parking place when I get it, and then I didn't know I know a packet, and then I don't know where the registrar's office, and they go on and on and on, and every problem in their life is outside themselves. Every problem they have in their life is outside themselves. And then here's what you also hear in their language. Miserable people. These things always happen to me. Everywhere I go. Lines. Look at this. Every time I get on the highway, they're all there. You know why? I think it's a new GPS thing. They're all calling each other. And they're saying, Barbara Johnson's going out on the highway. Let's go too and make her day miserable. You know, don't flatter yourself into thinking these things are only happening to you. They're happening to all of us. But the problem is, it's this way these people see that. So they develop an external locus of control. You think about the most difficult kids you guys work with. Most difficult kids you work with. Every problem they have is outside themselves. They've learned to be that way. You know, it's this person's fault, this person's fault, this person's fault. It's the school's fault. It's, you know, my teacher's fault. And every problem they have in life is outside themselves. And the same holds true for adults. Every problem, that, you know, if they're miserable, every problem is outside themselves. And you know, one of my favorite things that I've ever read, and I highly suggest this to anybody who's in a helping profession, is Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book written by Viktor Frankl. And he wrote it post-World War II. And it's about what he calls logotherapy. Logotherapy, logos means meaning. So what we're learning in therapy is we're learning about life's meaning. But here he was, during World War II, he was in Auschwitz. Extermination camp, Nazi death camp. Every day, he's watching people die. So many of his family members dying every day. And in the midst of all that, he said what he noted about human beings is the most remarkable thing. He said he watched people who were taking their last breath virtually, that last piece of bread that they have. And what are they doing? They're choosing to give it away to another human being. They're choosing. And he says the one thing that you cannot take away from human beings, you cannot take away their ability to choose. Now, he says, I can't change the Nazis. I can't change hatred. I can't change the prejudice, the racism, but I can change the way I think about it. And I can choose to find meaning in this situation. And it's just like the two people are stuck in traffic, one next to each other, and one chooses to go off their nut. You know, I got to tell you, folks, I admire you so much of coming from New York City that I know what traffic, for me, is very, I have an anxiety, practically a panic attack when I drive through New York City. But here in Albany, we never have traffic jams. We never have traffic jams. You know, it takes me 15 minutes to get to work on a good day. On a really bad day, 17 minutes. So we don't have traffic jams. One day, though, I'm on the Northway, which is our major highway here in Albany, and cars are backed up for like 4 miles. Not going anywhere. It must have been a major wreck or something. So we're just stuck. And I watched this guy about 3 cars in front of me. He gets out of his car. He's standing in the middle of the highway. He's got a cell phone, and I think it looked like an ice scraper. It might have been a scepter. I'm not sure, because maybe he was king of something. But he's out there screaming at the top of his lungs, and I figure, oh, I'll roll down my window. I'm going to get myself a free show, you know, while I'm watching this guy. And he's pacing around his car, and he's doing all these things as if that's going to do you any good. You know, in other words, maybe if you get a few laps in and you lose a few pounds, but otherwise, why do we put all of this adrenaline, you know, like a gallon's worth of adrenaline into a 10-cent problem? And very often, poor problem solvers will do that. They put all of this, and I'll just say this to you, folks. If you're having more than one crisis a week, you know, your life needs to be re-examined. If you're having more than one crisis a week, because think about that. There are people you know that they have 14 crises a day. Every day they come into work. And then my mail wasn't in its place today. You know, and they go through everything as a crisis, and the kids weren't in their seats. And every day is like that. And I'm thinking, wow. Now let me tell you about what's a crisis, folks. Losing your home to Hurricane Katrina, that's a crisis. You got a child who's in a diabetic coma, that's a crisis. You have a dear friend who's dying of cancer, that's a crisis. You know, who left the cap off the toothpaste? It's not a crisis. You know, long lines in the stores, that's not a crisis. That's an inconvenience. And what you'll notice about great problem solvers is that they can differentiate between the two. There's a lot of inconveniences in life. But they're happening to all of us. They're not just happening to you. They're happening to all of us. And that's the difference between peaceful people and angry people, is that they've got a million crises. And it's all outside themselves. And these are the two things that I think give you the fundamental, the foundation. One is impulse control. The other is to have that internal locus of control. And then as we build on that, kind of a higher level thinking, is that we know that those people that are well-adjusted are those that have empathy. The third one, which means I can feel what you're feeling. We know right at the top of the criteria. Antisocial personality disorder, psychopath. It's the people who can't feel what other people are feeling. And we know from the research that there's some people out there, we interview some of the serial killers in prison, and they're blank. There's nothing to their emotion. Hurt, maim, kill someone, there's nothing to that. But then we also know those people, and I think there's a small percentage of people that are born without a conscience, but I think the vast majority of the people out there that say, I don't care, I think they learn to be that way. I think they learn to be that way. In other words, something in their environment says, I don't care. And how many of you have had that 17-year-old says, I don't give a damn what anybody thinks. I don't care what anybody thinks. And you know what? I don't think they're lying. I don't think they're lying. And what's most important in our lives is what is it that we're doing to throw a wedge between that? I knew a young man, it was a relative, their son had been arrested several times, and he just kept saying, I have no one in my life that I can talk to. And what he's talking about is the adults in his life. He doesn't have a parent. He doesn't have a teacher. He doesn't have any figure in his life that he can connect with. And so it's no wonder that when you start to mistrust the whole system, what happens? You make up your own rules, and that's what we call antisocial. You start to be against all the social norms. So that empathy is really, really important. And the last one, simply social understanding, is simply saying that a major difference between violent and nonviolent people is that peaceful people see the differences in each other as a source of wisdom, whether it be religion, ethnicity, background, nationality, it doesn't matter. Whatever the difference is, I see it as a source of wisdom, not as a threat. Look at the most miserable human beings you know. Racist, sexist, they've got all, they're the first ones to tell those kinds of jokes because they're so threatened by anybody that's different than me. And this isn't rocket science. This is just what the research suggests, the major differences between violent and nonviolent people. It's not rocket science. And actually, in a program that we use with kids that my wife and I had actually written, we have superheroes that's their main powers, is red dog, blue fish, green bird, yellow cat. And what we found is that very, very, very young age children are capable of solving their own problems. I was using this conflict resolution program with a bunch of first graders. And this one teacher did a wonderful thing with this program, as she said, because the Champions of Dignity is the name of the program. It's these 4 superheroes that their powers are impulse control and problem solving, And she says that when kids come in and they have a problem, it's always, we start them out with, what's a big problem? Small problem. Big problem? Small problem. We have the kids put their hands up. Somebody brings matches to school. Big problem. Whenever it's big problems, you got to go get a teacher. Somebody nudges in front of you in line. And the kids, it takes them a while to go, okay, somebody tripped me on the playground. And what's a big problem? What's a small problem? But this teacher did a remarkable thing. She had this little table in the corner of her room. She said she called it her champions table. 2 kids would come in from recess and go, he knocked me down. They're all fired up. And she says, okay, looks like a job for the champions. And she would put the 2 kids over there. She would ask the other first grade kids, who wants to be red dog? Okay, impulse control. Who wants to be green bird? Okay. Who wants to be bluefish? She would say, okay, you guys got it. And she would let first graders solve their own problems. She says 90% of the time, they solve their own problems. And what I believe is that kids have an enormous amount of power. And if we say, well, at what point in life do we start to learn about impulse control? It's from the beginning. It's from the beginning, where we learn to have an internal locus of control. I can choose how I want to act in this situation, as opposed to always being kind of a victim of my environment.